Honestly, David, I don't know how much longer I can take it. It's just there. All the time. Her voice, my sister-in-law Sarah's voice, slithered through the thin wall separating my temporary bedroom from their hallway. Potting those ridiculous plants. It's like having a permanent broke teenager in the house. I know, my brother David sighed back, his tone heavy with put-upon exhaustion. It's a burden, Sarah. A real burden. All that gardening nonsense. What a waste of time. She needs to get a real job and stop freeloading. Burden. Freeloading. My breath caught in my throat, heat flooding my face. Ridiculous nonsense. They were talking about me. About my passion, the one thing keeping my spirit alive in their sterile, judgmental house. They thought I was a waste of space. A cold knot formed low in my stomach, tight and painful. But they had no idea. No clue that the ridiculous nonsense they despised was about to blossom into something spectacular. And the look on their faces when they found out. Oh, I could already imagine it. That satisfaction would be sweeter than any prize money. My name is Clara. Up until a few months before that overheard conversation, my life felt pretty stable, pretty normal. As a woman nearing 30, I had a decent job in marketing, not thrilling, but it paid the bills. I lived in a small apartment downtown, cramped but mine, with a balcony that was my personal jungle. That balcony was where my real life happened. It was overflowing with pots, soil bags, and carefully labeled seedlings. Because my true passion, the thing that made my soul feel anchored, was gardening. Specifically, hybridizing roses. I spent every spare moment coaxing new colors, new scents, stronger stems into existence. Trying to create beauty and resilience where there was only concrete and exhaust fumes. It was my sanctuary. Then the corporate axe fell. My company restructured, my entire department vanished overnight, and I was suddenly unemployed in a fiercely competitive job market. My savings were worryingly thin. Enough for maybe 2 months' rent, tops. Not nearly enough to weather a prolonged job search. That's when my older brother David and his wife Sarah swooped in with an offer. Their spare room. Just until you get back on your feet, of course, David had said, flashing a smile that seemed generous at the time. Sarah had chimed in, her eyes crinkling in a way I mistook for genuine kindness. They lived the suburban dream. A big house, pristine lawn, 2 expensive cars in the driveway. Both worked in finance, always immaculately dressed, talking about portfolios and European holidays. My life, with its perpetually dirt-caked fingernails and excited chatter about aphid control, must have seemed utterly alien, maybe even a bit pitiful to them. But I was desperate, so I accepted, overflowing with gratitude. I promised I wouldn't be any trouble, I'd contribute where I could, I'd find work immediately. I packed my life into boxes, carefully selecting only my most crucial rose experiments to bring along, setting them up in a sunny, neglected corner of their backyard. Initially it was bearable. Tense, awkward, like walking on eggshells in someone else's perfect life, but bearable. The weeks bled into months. The job market remained stubbornly difficult. I tailored resumes, wrote endless cover letters, networked until my cheeks ached from fake smiling, endured interviews that went nowhere. Back at David and Sarah's, the atmosphere began to curdle. Their performative generosity wore thin, replaced by a growing impatience I could feel like static electricity in the air. The comments started subtly. "Still playing in the dirt, Clara?" David would ask with a condescending chuckle as he left for his important job, adjusting his tie. Sarah would let out an exaggerated sigh if she encountered me carrying a bag of compost. "Oh, more mess for the patio, I suppose?" Her tone implied I was deliberately trying to lower their property value. I tried to shrink myself, to become invisible. I scrubbed their floors, cooked meals I couldn't afford myself, ran their errands. I spent hours hunched over my laptop at the library, applying for anything remotely suitable. The rest of the time I retreated to my designated corner of the yard, tending my roses. They were more than plants now. They were my therapy, my focus, my tiny rebellion against the feeling of failure. I poured my energy into my most ambitious project yet, creating a truly blue rose. Not mauve, not grayish purple, but a deep, vibrant blue, the holy grail of rose breeding. Then came the first incident that felt undeniably intentional. I went out one morning to check on a tray of delicate seedlings, the result of months of painstaking cross-pollination. They were tiny, vulnerable green shoots, full of promise. I found them floating in a pool of muddy water. Drowned. The fragile stems were limp, blackened. My stomach plummeted. Sarah was lounging on the patio nearby, sipping coffee, engrossed in her tablet. When I asked, my voice trembling slightly, what happened, she barely looked up. "Oh, that," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "The sprinkler must have malfunctioned. Or maybe I was a bit overzealous watering my petunias nearby this morning. So clumsy." But there was no sprinkler near that tray. Her petunias were yards away. And her apology held no weight, just airy indifference. A cold dread washed over me. It wasn't an accident. This wasn't just about me overstaying my welcome. This felt personal. Malicious. A seed of deep unease took root in my gut, refusing to be ignored. After the seedling massacre, the atmosphere shifted from passively unwelcoming to actively hostile, though still cloaked in plausible deniability. David, who'd initially made vague promises about tapping his professional network for me, developed selective amnesia. "Oh, right, that marketing lead. Completely slipped my mind," he'd mutter, before launching into a detailed account of his latest stock gains or Sarah's preparations for an upcoming charity auction. He made sure I knew how busy and important his life was, implicitly contrasting it with my own perceived idleness. Sarah's campaign focused on my gardening supplies. Despite me keeping everything neat and confined to a small, out-of-the-way section of their pristine garage, she acted as if I were cultivating hazardous waste. "What is that damp, earthy smell?" she'd ask loudly, usually when they had guests over, wrinkling her nose dramatically. "Clara, are your experiments breeding fungus again?" It was designed to humiliate, to make me feel small and dirty. Their comments about my life choices became more direct, laced with faux concern that barely masked their judgment. "You know, Clara," Sarah mused one evening, inspecting her flawless manicure under the light, "a woman your age really ought to have her life more sorted. This flower fixation is quaint, but it's not exactly building a future, is it? You're letting your best years slip away playing with petals." David would nod sagely beside her. "We just worry about you, sis. This lack of direction, it's not healthy in the long run." Aimlessness, lack of direction. I was working harder than ever. Job hunting felt like a full-time job in itself, and my horticultural work demanded precision, patience, and constant learning. Their concern felt increasingly like a deliberate strategy to undermine my confidence, perhaps hoping I'd just give up and disappear. I started overhearing more fragmented conversations, whispers from the kitchen or muffled words from behind their closed bedroom door. Phrases drifted down the hallway. "Such a financial drain. Embarrassing, really. When will she take responsibility?" And that word again, like a persistent, stinging insect. Leech. My corner of the yard became my refuge, my bunker. I channeled all my hurt and frustration into the Blue Rose project. It was no longer just a horticultural challenge. It was my silent rebuttal, my proof of worth, even if only to myself. I spent hours out there, grafting delicate stems, testing soil acidity, whispering encouragement to the tightly closed buds that held the promise of that impossible color. Away from my plants, the house felt like enemy territory. Among them, I felt a semblance of peace, of purpose. One dreary afternoon, escaping into the world of online gardening forums, a banner ad caught my eye. Bloom and Grow National Horticultural Grand Prize. A staggering $1 million award for horticultural innovation. It seemed absurdly out of reach, the kind of thing prestigious universities or massive corporations won. But then I looked at the photos I'd taken of my most promising blue rose hybrid, codenamed Midnight Blue Dream. The buds were still developing, but the color peeking through was unlike anything I'd ever seen. What did I have to lose? Filling out the detailed online application, uploading my meticulous notes and photographic documentation of the cross-pollination and grafting process, felt like a secret act of defiance. A tiny flare sent up in the dark. I didn't tell David or Sarah. Sharing this fragile hope with them felt impossible. I could already hear their dismissive laughter, their warnings not to get my hopes up. This secret was mine, a small ember I guarded carefully against their chilling negativity. The undercurrent of resentment finally broke the surface, crashing down with the force of a calculated ultimatum. David and Sarah summoned me for a talk one Saturday morning. They sat opposite me on their expensive gray sofa, their faces arranged in masks of grave concern that didn't quite reach their eyes. "Clara," David began, leaning forward, steepling his fingers in a way that always made him look like a smug banker closing a deal. "We need to discuss the ongoing situation. Simply not sustainable." Sarah nodded, her lips pursed tightly. "We've been incredibly patient, Claire, truly. But it's been several months now, and frankly, we don't see you making sufficient effort to resolve your circumstances." I started to protest, to list the dozens of applications, the soul-crushing interviews, the constant search, but David held up a hand, silencing me. "We feel we need to set a deadline. For your own good, you understand. To provide motivation." He paused for effect. "We're giving you 1 month from today. 1 month to secure full-time employment and find your own accommodation." My blood turned to ice water. 1 month? In this market? He wasn't finished. "If after 1 month you haven't managed that," he continued, his voice hardening slightly, "we'll have to insist you begin contributing fairly to the household. Let's say $1,000 a month for your room and board?" $1,000. The figure hung in the air, obscene and impossible. They knew I was broke. They knew I was desperately trying. This wasn't motivation. It was a thinly veiled eviction notice. Or, Sarah added, her eyes gleaming with something sharp and unpleasant, "you could always try selling off some of that gardening clutter. Surely those pots and special soils and weird plant things must be worth something to someone?" The contempt was naked now. "Sell my research? My passion?" My heart hammered against my ribs, a sickening mix of anger and panic churning inside me. They weren't just unsupportive. They were actively trying to sabotage my chances, to force me out onto the street. Later that day, reeling from the ultimatum, I sought refuge with my plants. I'd recently invested my last few dollars in a cheap, plastic-covered mini greenhouse frame to shield my most critical experiments, especially the primary midnight blue dream specimens from the elements. As I approached, I stopped dead. The plastic sheeting on one side wasn't just torn. It was slashed violently multiple times, gaping open like jagged wounds. Inside, chaos. Several pots were overturned, soil spilled across the ground. Some of my backup blue rose grafts, meticulously nurtured for months, had been ripped out, their roots exposed, tossed aside like weeds. The smell of disturbed earth and crushed leaves filled the air. It was brutal, deliberate destruction. Tears blurred my vision as I sank to my knees, my hands shaking as I tried to assess the damage. My main midnight blue dream plant, the one I'd entered into the competition, was miraculously untouched. I'd moved it to a slightly more sheltered spot just days before, acting on a gut feeling. But the attack felt deeply personal, a violation aimed straight at my heart. I stormed inside, confronting David and Sarah, my voice thick with tears and fury. "Something happened to my greenhouse. Someone slashed it open, destroyed my plants. Did you see anything? Did you hear anything?" David put on a show of mild surprise. "Vandalism? Good heavens, Claire. In this neighborhood? How awful. Must have been some bored teenagers cutting through the yards." Sarah added with infuriating calmness, "Well, honestly, Claire, you do tend to leave a lot of stuff piled up back there. It rather invites trouble, doesn't it? Perhaps it's for the best. Less clutter." Their denials were too smooth, their lack of concern too absolute. I knew with chilling certainty, They were either directly responsible or willfully blind. They saw it as just another way to hasten my departure. In that moment I felt utterly betrayed, completely alone. But as I carefully, tenderly repotted my surviving blue rose, whispering apologies to its bruised leaves, something shifted inside me. The hurt began to harden into a cold, sharp resolve. They wanted to break me. They wouldn't succeed. A few days later, a thick, cream-colored envelope arrived in the mail, addressed to me. My fingers fumbled with the seal, my heart pounding. It bore the logo of the Bloom and Grow Foundation. Inside a letter. My blue rose, Midnight Blue Dream, had been selected. I was one of 5 finalists for the National Horticultural Grand Prize. A finalist. Me. Hope, fierce and unexpected, flared within me. I clutched the letter, my secret weapon. The 1-month clock was ticking louder than ever, but now, maybe, just maybe, I had a fighting chance. I didn't say a word to David or Sarah. The 30 days David and Sarah had decreed flew by in a haze of anxiety and frantic activity. I packed boxes, feeling the weight of each possession, wondering where it would end up. I scoured online listings for impossibly cheap rooms, my stomach twisting with dread. The job search yielded nothing but polite rejections or silence. Meanwhile, my brother and sister-in-law radiated smug anticipation. They'd make casually cruel inquiries, their voices dripping with false sympathy. "Any luck finding a little place yet, Clara?" Sarah would ask, examining an invisible speck of dust on her gleaming countertop. "Made any headway selling off that horticultural equipment?" David would add, flipping through the Financial Times. Their eyes, however, held the unmistakable glint of people counting down the seconds until an unwelcome guest departs. The Bloom and Grow Awards ceremony was scheduled, with almost poetic cruelty, for the day before my eviction deadline. The irony wasn't lost on me. I bought a simple navy blue sheath dress at a consignment shop, my sole preparation for the event. I held zero expectation of winning. The other finalists were titans of the horticultural world, professors with endowed chairs, owners of multi-million-dollar nursery empires, geneticists from prestigious research institutes. And then there was me, Clara Evans, unemployed, living on sufferance in her brother's spare room, growing roses in a corner of a backyard she was about to be kicked out of. I mumbled something to David and Sarah about attending a special lecture at the Botanical Society. They exchanged a look that clearly communicated still wasting her time on that nonsense. But they didn't probe further, too preoccupied with finalizing plans for their soon-to-be vacated spare room. The awards ceremony itself felt like stepping into another dimension. It took place in a vast, stunning conservatory within the city's botanical gardens. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, waiters circulated with trays of champagne, and the air buzzed with the sophisticated chatter of people who used words like phenotype and cultivar in everyday conversation. I clutched my worn handbag, feeling utterly out of place, my heart performing frantic palpitations against my ribs. As they announced the runners-up, I applauded politely for each name called, managing a weak smile. A respected botanist from California. The head of research from a famous Dutch nursery. Well, that was that. It had been nice to have a brief escape before facing reality tomorrow. Then the host, a celebrity garden designer I recognized from television, stepped up to the main podium. And now, he announced, his voice resonating through the hushed conservatory, the moment we've all been waiting for. The winner of this year's Bloom and Grow National Horticultural Grand Prize, taking home the $1 million award for the truly revolutionary development of the Midnight Blue Dream Rose. Miss Clara Evans. Silence. My brain struggled to process the sound. Clara Evans? Midnight Blue Dream? My name? My rose? The air seemed to rush out of my lungs. Then applause erupted, swelling around me like a tidal wave. I remained frozen, staring straight ahead. Someone beside me, an elegant older woman, touched my arm gently. "That's you, my dear," she whispered kindly. "Go on up. Numbly, I pushed back my chair and somehow navigated the aisle, my legs feeling like disconnected stilts. On stage, the bright lights were blinding. The host beamed, shaking my hand vigorously as he presented me with a ridiculously oversized presentation check and a heavy, intricately cut crystal trophy shaped like a blooming flower. Flashbulbs popped relentlessly. Faces in the crowd swam before my eyes, smiling, applauding. $1 million. For my blue rose. The flower born from lonely hours, whispered hopes and defiant resilience in a hostile backyard. The ridiculous nonsense. A dizzying wave of disbelief washed over me, followed by pure, unadulterated joy. Then the event organizers descended, a whirlwind of enthusiasm and logistics. The PR team leader, a dynamic woman with a clipboard, was already planning. "We absolutely need photos," she declared. "And interviews. Perhaps we could visit your garden, your lab space tomorrow morning? Capture the environment where this incredible innovation took place. See where the magic happened. My lab. My little corner of David and Sarah's yard. The scene of the vandalism." A slow, dangerous smile began to spread across my face, a spark igniting behind my eyes. Yes, I thought. Let's definitely see where the magic happened. The power had just shifted dramatically, and my dear brother and sister-in-law were about to have their carefully curated world turned upside down. I let myself into David and Sarah's house late that night, the oversized replica check tucked discreetly into a tote bag, the heavy crystal trophy still in its protective box. My nerves tingled with a mixture of exhilaration and trepidation. Their voices drifted from the living room, thick with smug self-congratulation. "So relieved her clutter will finally be gone tomorrow," Sarah was saying, her tone light and dismissive. "We can finally reclaim the patio space. I'm thinking a new modular sofa, maybe something in that nice gray weatherproof fabric." David made a sound of agreement. "Absolutely. Good riddance to all that dirt and mess. We can repaint the spare room over the weekend. Get it set up as my proper home office. The relief will be immense." Taking a deep, steadying breath, I walked into the living room. They looked up, their expressions shifting from relaxed satisfaction to mild annoyance at my interruption. "Oh, you're back," David said, glancing pointedly at the clock. "Did your little flower club meeting run exceptionally late tonight?" I placed the trophy box on their expensive glass coffee table with a deliberate, soft thud. Then I slowly pulled the large replica check from my tote bag and unrolled it with a theatrical flourish. "Actually," I said, my voice remarkably steady, "my little flower club was the Bloom and Grow National Horticultural Awards ceremony. And as it turns out, I won." I watched, savoring every micro-expression as their brains scrambled to process the information. First, blank confusion. Then their eyes darted from my face to the check, focusing on the words $1 million printed in bold next to grand prize winner and my name, Clara Evans. Sarah's perfectly lipsticked mouth fell open, forming a silent, stunned O. David's jaw went slack, his eyes blinking rapidly as if trying to clear a faulty image. "You what?" he stammered, his usual smooth confidence completely evaporating. "You won $1 million? For those plants?" The disbelief warred with the ingrained disdain in his voice. "Yes," I replied, allowing myself a small, tight smile. "For my ridiculous nonsense. My midnight blue dream rose." The change in them was instantaneous and almost grotesque. Sarah's face contorted into a mask of beaming, desperate warmth. "Clara. Oh my goodness, Clara, that's absolutely astounding. We always knew you had a special talent. Didn't we say that, David?" She nudged him sharply in the ribs. David, still visibly reeling, scrambled to paste on a supportive expression. Yes, naturally. We always believed in your horticultural endeavors. Deep down, you know. We were just concerned about balance, trying to push you." His voice was high-pitched, his smile stretched painfully thin. The speed of their pivot from contempt to cloying adulation was nauseating. The next morning brought the promised media attention. a camera crew from the local news station, a renowned photographer from a major gardening magazine, and Ms. Jenkins, the polished representative from the Bloom and Grow Foundation. David and Sarah were practically vibrating with nervous energy, dressed in their Sunday best. Sarah fussed around, offering coffee and pastries she'd clearly panic-bought from the gourmet bakery downtown. "We are just bursting with pride for our Clara," Sarah gushed to the news reporter, attempting to sling a proprietary arm around my shoulders. I subtly shifted away. She's always poured her heart and soul into her green things. We even dedicated a significant portion of our garden purely for her research. David jumped in, eager to reinforce the narrative. "A real hidden genius, our Clara. We always told her, follow your passion no matter what. We provided the space, the encouragement." The reporter, a keen-eyed woman named Ms. Albright, turned her microphone towards me. "Claire, what an achievement. It must have been invaluable having such a supportive family fostering your work during development." This was it. My moment. I smiled, a wide, genuine smile this time, making sure to meet Ms. Albright's gaze but speaking clearly enough for everyone, especially David and Sarah, to hear. While I began, my tone bright and thoughtful, it certainly was an experience. Developing Midnight Blue Dream required immense focus, especially during challenging times. There were moments I nearly abandoned the project altogether, particularly when I was frequently told my gardening was just a silly waste of time and that I was becoming a significant burden while I searched for more traditional employment. David and Sarah's smiles froze on their faces. Sarah's hand, halfway to patting my arm encouragingly, stopped dead in midair. And then I continued smoothly. There was that rather distressing setback when my small research greenhouse was vandalized, slashed open actually, and several crucial backup plants were destroyed. It happened right around the time I was given a strict deadline to move out because I couldn't afford the sudden $1,000 rent demand for my room here. That incident truly tested my dedication. I saw Ms. Albright raise an eyebrow almost imperceptibly, her pen scratching quickly on her notepad. The blood had completely drained from David's face, leaving it a pasty gray. Sarah looked like she was about to throw up. But I concluded, projecting confidence and relief, I managed to protect the primary specimen and persevere. And now, thanks to the incredible generosity of the Bloom and Grow Foundation, I'll be purchasing my own property very soon. A place with ample room for a much larger garden, and perhaps even a dedicated laboratory space. I'm even considering establishing a small grant for aspiring amateur hybridizers. Might need to hire an assistant eventually. I let my gaze drift pointedly towards my brother and sister-in-law, whose faces were now identical masks of pure, unadulterated horror as the full implication of my words landed. "It's truly amazing," I added, turning back to the reporter with a final, radiant smile. "What a little boring hobby can lead to, isn't it?" The ensuing silence was thick with unspoken truths. The camera kept rolling. My revenge wasn't loud or aggressive, but it was precise, public, and utterly devastating to their carefully constructed facade. The fallout was swift and deeply satisfying. Within weeks, the prize money secured, I found my dream property, a slightly neglected but charming cottage with a huge, overgrown garden crying out for attention, complete with a dilapidated shed perfect for converting into my state-of-the-art rose lab. Packing my belongings out of David and Sarah's house felt like shedding a heavy, suffocating skin. They tried to mend fences, of course. Once the initial shock wore off, the phone calls began. Sarah's voice oozed artificial sweetness, full of stammered apologies about misunderstandings and how they were only trying tough love to motivate me. David took a different tack, appealing to family loyalty, hinting broadly about how my newfound fortune could significantly benefit the family unit, perhaps through a generous loan or investment in his latest venture. I listened politely, kept my responses brief and coolly civil. The lines weren't completely severed, but the trust, the familial warmth, that was irrevocably broken. Their actions had poisoned the well. I heard later, through mutual acquaintances, that the news segments and magazine features, while professionally focused on my achievement, had subtly tarnished their image within their social circle. The story of the overlooked, belittled sister striking gold with her silly hobby after being pressured and possibly sabotaged didn't paint them in a flattering light. People noticed their strained smiles at social events, the slight cooling in demeanor from former admirers. Life now is quiet, but in the best possible way. It's filled with the scent of earth, the challenge of coaxing life from stubborn stems, the satisfaction of creation. My midnight blue dream roses are thriving, capturing attention from growers worldwide. I'm no longer defined by my job status or my living situation. I'm Clara Evans, the horticulturalist who dared to dream of an impossible flower. My days are my own, spent in my garden, planning future projects, sometimes mentoring young gardeners online. That period living with David and Sarah feels like a strange, painful dream now. Looking back, their cruelty, their dismissiveness, it acted like a harsh winter on my spirit. It forced me to dig my roots deeper, to find strength I didn't know I possessed, to reach harder for the light. They intended to make me feel small, insignificant, a burden. But in their attempt to extinguish my small flame, they inadvertently fanned it into a wildfire. The boring hobby they mocked didn't just win me financial independence. It bought back my self-worth, gave me control over my own narrative, and cultivated a future brimming with possibility. Sometimes, justice doesn't announce itself with thunder, but unfolds slowly, beautifully, like the petals of a prize-winning rose. And the peace I feel now? It's real, it's earned, and it's mine.